which they don't and they won't, because there's no chance of us getting a change to the bylaws in my lifetime. Any other comments on the having the concept of a proxy in our election rules? Let's just take a straw poll, not on the resolution, but on that one item. How many are in favor of continuing to offer the option of a proxy? Okay, that's a majority. Sorry, Dave?
Well, I expected that.
Dave brought up the second issue, and that is on item 6. Whether, if there are two conflicting proxies from the same member, which of them survives, the oldest or the newest? Let me just comment on what our policy has been up until now. Our policy has been that there's a formal way to revoke a proxy, and only one way to revoke a proxy, and that's for the granting member, not the proxy holder, but the granting member, to, in writing, inform the secretary that such proxy is revoked. I know a member in this last election attempted to use a proxy as a revoking mechanism in and of itself, and we declined to allow him to do that. In fact, in discussing it, what we decided to do in this last election was allow any proxy to stand as the valid proxy as long as it was not revoked. Hence, an unrevoked earlier proxy had precedence over a later proxy. So we now can debate whether we want to stick by that policy or adopt a new policy, that any new proxy automatically revokes an old proxy. Yeah?
I like the simplicity of it, I really do. Now, the only thing as a debating point that I see is then the proxy holder. I would assume that if I had a proxy, I gave you a proxy, and then I decided I wanted to change it. The rules are I had to go to the secretary and say I revoked my proxy, but I would give you the courtesy of telling me I revoked it. The only problem going down the simple road is you may never know that I just gave Dave a proxy now.
Right.
You're going to walk in with your proxy and say, no, there's one from Dave. I don't know in either case that you really find out about it, but I'm thinking if I had to revoke it formally to the secretary, maybe I'd think to come and tell you that I'm revoking my proxy. But I love that as being a much easier way to proceed. I like that idea. Whatever's the latest, and while we publish that, the problem is then the holders of the proxy are not going to have a clue. What do they've got paper?
Well, the problem is it means when we have an election, if somebody has two proxies, one person comes with a proxy from Joe Blow, and then person 2 comes with a proxy from Joe Blow, we have to see which is the later of the two.
Which is not.
It's harder for us that way to do it where it's the most recent proxy. But I think that's generally the way it's done. I mean, a proxy is like an amendment to your will. It's the most recent one that stands, not the earliest one that stands.
We talked earlier, I don't know if it was ever resolved, but the idea of issuing a standard form proxy, and in that standard form you would have the time in which it was signed by the signer, so they would eliminate that possibility from confusion to use that.
No, isn't the only problem with that is doesn't the it's either properties owner act or non-stock
corporation.
So proxy can basically be any kind of thing you want to write it on. And you can write it on the back.
But we can still issue standard form. That wouldn't stop us from doing it.
Right. But I don't have to use a standard form.
You don't.
Exactly. You give out the standard instructions though.
But I think you have a standard form that would more likely to be used for the company the voting right.
You could issue a proposed standard form. You could not
Suggested.
suggested, a standard form, but we could not mandate it. Non-stock Corporation Act is clear that the back of an envelope is quite fine.
Unfortunately.
Posted note is good.
So we might adopt that policy. We can't make that official. We must use that form.
Do you want to vote on pieces here, or what?
I don't want to vote on it. I just want to take a straw poll, and then I want to rewrite the.
I like the consensus on. I like Dave's idea. I really do. Latest proxy rules, regardless.
Is there a general sense of the board that the latest proxy should be the one that supersedes all other proxies? and effectively revokes all of the proxies, even though the older proxy has not been formally revoked. Okay, everybody kind of like that? Okay,
I like that approach.
all right. Later.
I think the comparison to the will is a good comparison.
One other comment that came in late in the game here. I don't think we say in here anywhere that, and this is just debating, only members of the association may act as proxy holders for other members. I don't think we say that, and I think we probably should. We don't have to.
I don't think we
Can't.
Why can't we?
Non-Stop Corporation Act is clear, anybody can be a proxy holder, anybody.
You give it to your lawyer or a priest or whatever.
We had a question somewhere, was it this year's election? I know we talked about that, maybe it was election day, but it's saying, can we look that up, Dave? I believe, I'm correct.
Okay.
Because that would be
Robin
nice.
has the answer.
I have it right here. It goes, it says, an appointment of a proxy is revocable unless the appointment form or electronic transmission states it is irrevocable. Appointments coupled with an interest include the appointment of a creditor, an employee, a party to a voting agreement. And then it starts in death. If your proxy dies, your proxy holder dies, it's revoked. Basically what it says.
Makes sense.
But it doesn't really say if the voting member passes away, if the proxy becomes invalid.
This is who the proxy holder is that we're talking about right now. right?
Any fiduciary who is entitled to vote any membership interest may vote such membership interest by proxy. And it doesn't matter who the proxy holder is.
That's the key.
Yeah. You have to be a member grant proxy, but not the holder.
Just a comment when the vote administrator and the secretary check all the proxies to determine that the member who signed is eligible
Okay.
at the time of the vote. So all proxies are checked.
To that point, you'll notice one other change in this is that the proxies have to be submitted at the same time, by the same time the absentee ballots are due, not bringing them to the meeting.
Why did you do that one?
Well, Dave suggested it, first of all, and I thought it was a
Well, if
good
absentee
idea.
ballots are due at a certain time, why aren't proxies? They're essentially the same thing, is what people are trying to tell me, and I don't believe that, but why aren't they due at the same time?
And we'll give the vote administrator, at least overnight, to reconcile proxies.
Well, let's go one more step. If your proxy is directed, the way this says, I see a reason for that. If it's not a directed one, then I would say, it should be a really meeting, because they may want to do something from the floor.
Right, we're requiring directed proxies.
That's the way it's written now.
Mhm.
Yes, that may still be a piece of discussion before we get to the end of it. But it would make a difference. If it was not a directed proxy, then you couldn't put a time on it, because that person could be doing business on the floor for the meeting. Does that make sense?
You'd have to wait for 4 nominations in
Yeah.
order for the proxy holder
Because
to
I
know how
know
they
a
want to
lot of
execute the proxy.
proxies, if it isn't directed, I could decide at the meeting who I wanted to vote for.
Well, yeah, unless the proxies are filled out in advance, knowing that somebody's going to get nominated on the floor, which
Or
is what
just
happens.
just give me the authority. If they're not directed, you can just give me your proxy for your vote, and I do whatever I want to at the
Well,
meeting.
undirected proxies, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I just said. If it's,
That to me is the only reason to have proxies, to have an undirected.
well, that's the next discussion. isn't
I
it?
mean, I go right back, a directed proxy is the same as an absentee ballot, and we have that.